My name is KM. Aba, I don't know why he asked me to talk to you guys. I have nothing else to do, so I was like, yeah, I'll come.
He's very humble. He's a property buyer's agent and other stuff as well. But that's primarily what he's going to be talking to us about. But yeah, he's got experience purchasing property for people and analysing the, I guess, housing market and that sort of stuff as well. And yeah.
Thank you. So so I think it seems like you guys are bored of listening to health talks and whatnot, so we're changing it up. So we'll talk about, can you guys see this? Yeah. So real estate, we'll talk about real estate investing in the current market. It's like a quick phrase over and smash me with questions, So this is me. I'm KM. So I'm the director of First Brick Property Buyers Agency, which I mentioned is a property buyers agency. So if you've never heard of a buyer's agent, we are the opposite of real estate agents. So most people know real estate agents, they sell properties. Buyers agents, we help people buy property. So we represent buyers in the market. We typically work with investors, but we also work with people who want to buy a house to live in. And with investors, we look at data and across all of Australia, and I'll get into it a little bit later on. But that's what my business is. And just last week, I was on the cover of the Australian Business Journal, which was pretty cool. So I only did the presentation 2 days ago, so I thought I'll throw that picture in. So, that's who I am. But we'll get into it. So what is real estate investing? So there's two major subtypes when it comes to investing in real estate. You have passive investing, and then you have active investing. This talk will primarily be around passive because that's what most people tend to do. Active investing is when you're doing like developments, like buying old properties, knocking them down, building them up, selling them, or subdividing land. So buying a big plot of land, cutting it up into a couple pieces, selling that off, or doing renovation, flipping, like you see on, what's the show? The Block and all that stuff. That's active. You have to be very into it. You have to have a lot of time. You can't just kind of do it on the side. So that's a very different side to real estate. What most other people do is the passive investing, which is you buy property, you hold it, you let it do its thing, you make money, see you later, have a good day. So that's what we'll talk about today. So why do we invest in real estate? Aside from your job and your employment, there is only really three methods or three categories of investing. And it's starting a business, buying shares or crypto or whatever, that kind of category, and then real estate. There is no other way to make money outside your job. Everything falls into those three categories. Why we like real estate the most, the biggest reason is leverage. Something called leverage, which is when we go to the bank, sorry, that's probably my phone. Yeah. When you go to the bank and the bank gives you money to buy these assets. When you look at a business, depending on your business and your experience and whatnot, the bank usually only gives you around 20% of a loan. For example, if you've been in business for a long time, you're a big shot, hundreds of millions, they might give you more. But for most Australians, that's kind of the range. When it comes to shares, you get capped at 50%. So I'll put $1 in, the bank will give me $1 back. When it comes to real estate, you can actually borrow, this is actually incorrect, you can actually borrow more than 100% of the loan. But for most people, it's 90 to 95%. The norm is 80%. You guys, being in the medical profession, actually have an advantage where you can actually borrow up to 90% and not pay something called LMI. And LMI is Lender's Mortgage Insurance, which is an insurance you pay to insure the bank. So when we borrow more money, you obviously add a higher risk to the bank because you owe them more. And there's something called Lender's Mortgage Insurance. And if you're not in the medical professional or an accountant or a solicitor, those are like special careers or professions that the banks like because you're deemed less risky careers. They will actually let you borrow more money without paying this extra insurance. So in real estate, you can borrow up to 90-95% of the value of the asset. So if you're talking about a $500 or $1 million property, the bank will give you 900 grand, and you only need to save up 100 plus costs, stamp duty, and taxes and whatnot. So the biggest reason we like investing in real estate is because of leverage. And why leverage is good is because your results are magnified. So when I buy a $500,000 asset or a property, and I only put 50 grand down, 10%, 50 grand, I had to save 50 grand plus stamp duty and whatnot. So I had to save 60, 70 grand. And I bought a $500,000 property. If that property goes up 10%, the property is now worth $550,000. I only put $50,000, but my results are on the total asset. I've made 50 grand off my 50 grand investment. Whereas when it comes to shares or business, because you have to put in more money from your pocket, your results are not magnified. There is the opposite side. If you're not doing well in real estate, your results are magnified the other way and you're losing big as well. But the biggest reason we like real estate is because of leverage and because your results are magnified. There's also some other things which we'll talk about a bit later, which is equity release and compound growth, and we'll get into that pretty soon. When it comes to strategy, there are two main strategies in real estate. You have capital growth, which is the value of your asset going up, and then you have cash flow, which is like your rent from your tenants. Most people think you can only get one or the other. So most people will buy a property thinking I can only get cash flow via granny flats or buying in rural areas with very high rent. Or people think I'll get really good capital growth buying Sydney CBD or whatever, but my rent's going to be rubbish. That is definitely a strategy, or you can buy one or the other. You can definitely get both. It's a very bad misconception where you can't get both. We do it all the time with our business, with our clients, and this day and age, you have to kind of get both. Otherwise, you can't build a portfolio. You get stuck. The bank doesn't like you. So those are the two main strategies. We'll talk about scaling and using equity. So, and we'll come back to that strategy before why we have to have a mix. So, this is a little photo here, and just to explain equity. Does anyone know what equity is? No? Yes? No? I'll get into it. All right. So, equity is essentially, if I buy a property for $400,000 in this example, and it's gone up to $700,000, the equity is that difference, right? So if I bought a property for 400, it's now worth 700, and I sold it, I've made $300,000. That's not in the bank's interest for you to sell a property though, because the bank likes giving money, because in return you're paying interest. So you're giving them more money, right? So the bank wants you to keep their loans with them. So the bank says, hey, instead of you selling that property and taking 300 grand, we'll give you, as if you sold the property, we'll give you that money, use it for another loan, now you have two loans with us. Yeah, and they keep doing that, and you keep getting more loans, and they keep getting more interest. Everyone's kind of happy. So how it's calculated is, but obviously the bank doesn't give you the full amount because that's a little bit risky. They say, what if you default, you can't afford it. So they'll give you 80% of that difference. So if I bought it for 400,000 and I didn't pay a single dollar off, I still have $400,000 left, and it's gone up to $700,000. I say, hey bank, I could sell it. I made 300 grand, but you're going to lose the loan. Give me equity. They say, no worries. 80%, we'll give you 80%. So 80% of the 700,000 is 560. And when they take away your existing loan, which are 400, you have $160,000 available equity, and they'll give it to you, cash. Here's money. Here's 160 grand. Go buy another property. Go do what you want. Don't buy a car.
Put it on black.
Yeah, don't put it on black. They won't like that. You usually have to have another asset lined up. But you can actually do a cash out, and people do that and buy cars and start businesses and whatnot. But usually it's to buy another property. So you go from one and you buy another one. And when this property goes up, and you do the same thing, and you get another one. And you can use equity from multiple properties to buy one property. So now I've got 3 properties. 2 of them have gone up, one of them's kind of not doing much. So I take equity from those 2 and buy a 4th one. And you can continue this process. Sorry, do you want to just turn it off? So, the biggest thing with equity though, is you have to show that you can continue to afford to pay the loan, right? So this is something called serviceability. We have to service the loan. And this is where cash flow and rent is very, very important when building a portfolio. You can have all the equity in the world. I could have a $1 loan and my property could be worth $100 million. If I cannot afford to pay off that loan, the next loan, they will not give you a single cent. So cash flow is very important, right? When they calculate your serviceability, they're looking at how much income you've got in. So that's all your rents combined from all your properties, any shares, any dividends, your employment, your salary, whatever. And they look at all your outgoings, so your loans, your debts. And then they also take into account you have to live, right? So there's got something called HEMS, which is your minimum living expense, and they work that out. And after they work all of that out, They also check if you can make your repayments on a higher interest rate. So currently the interest rate, the retail interest rate is like 3.5%. They'll check if you can make the repayments on 6%. And if you can, hey, here's some money. So you always have to have obviously a considerable amount more money coming in than going out. And that's why rent is very important. Back 20, 30 years ago, it didn't really matter because property prices were not expensive. You know, now with the average property is over $1 million, rent's important to be able to build a portfolio. So compound growth was one of the other reasons we like investing in real estate. And I ask a question. If I give you two options, I'll give you 1 cent today and I'll double it every day for a month, or I'll give you $1 million right now. Show of hands who goes for the $1 million. Oh, you're all very smart. Or just no one's going to put their hand up regardless of what I say. Anyone going to take the 1 cent option? No one's getting lollies.
Depends. If I get the $1 million and put it on black, maybe I'll do.
So, thank you for your interaction, guys. I don't know if you can see this image. So this is a photo we put up a long time ago on our social media. It's the power of compound. And that's a story of, so there was this really rich dude like a long time ago, and he asked his son, do you want 1 cent today, and I'll double it every single day for the rest of the month, or do you want $1 million? And he picked $1 million. And most people picked $1 million. If you picked $1 million, you've lost $9 million. Right? The 1 cent doubled every day for 27 days is the wrong decision. Right? Because at 27 days, you've only made 670,000. But the last 3 or 4 days, that's where compound growth really happens, because you're doubling such big numbers. You end up on day 31 with $10.5 million from 1 cent, doubled every single day. So the idea behind compound is the longer you are in a market, or the longer you're holding an asset, the bigger the jumps get and the more money you make, right? So it's something we say all the time is time in the market is more important than timing the market. You know, the media, the news, they're always going to talk to you about the market's up, down, left, right, whatever. It's the worst time to buy. The whole world's crashing. And then tomorrow, market boom. You missed the boat, right? No one can ever time the market perfectly. We do data every single day. This is what we do all day. And I cannot tell you the bottom of the market simply because if today's the bottom, I don't know today's the bottom until tomorrow. Until it started going up, right? So it's impossible to time the market perfectly. What we know is the longer you're in the market, you probably can't see this, the longer you're in the market, the more your growth is. So this photo is of a property at $500,000, and in the first decade, and assuming 8% a year, you can assume whatever, but just using 8% a year growth. The first 10 years, yeah, you make a little bit of money. The second 10 years, it starts to get a bit bigger, you make more money. The last 30 years, if you see this, it's just like, oh, touch screen. The last 10 years, the third decade, it just skyrockets. Because you started with 500,000 and went up to 550. And then 10% of 550, so it's 605. And small jumps. But all of a sudden you're at $1 million and you're going up by 100 grand. And then you're going up 110 grand. So the longer you're holding a property, obviously it has to be performing as well, but the longer you hold it, generally you do better. So that's why we like real estate, because of compound effect. Cool, KM, great, we like real estate. How do you find these good properties, right? Because not every property does well. Does anyone know what the most important element of an investment purchase is? Like, what's the most important factor? Is it the house? Is it the land? Anyone?
Location.
Oh, who's the location? Yeah, good. Location. There's a show called Location. Like, we can say location all day long. Location is easily the most important part of buying property. So there are 4 fundamentals. Price is the first one because you can't change that. That's your budget, right? So you go to your broker, you go to your bank, and he or she says, you got 500K. You can't change that. Aside from price, what you can control is location, land, and the property. I'll tell you right now, the land and the property are almost irrelevant. It's all about location. Now, I'll tell you why. Everyone gets hung up on land, right? You can have 200 square meters in Sydney CBD. You can have 6,000 square meters in the middle of Australia. That 6,000 square meters is worthless because there's nothing around. There's no scarcity. No one cares about it. That 200 square meters in Sydney CBD is very, very expensive, right? Probably tens of 20 to 30 million for that little bit of land. So it's all about the location. Once you get the location right, honestly, the rest doesn't matter. You still want to get it right, but even if you bought a lemon in the right location, is better than buying a mansion in the wrong location, like easily. So the location we say does about 85% of the heavy lifting, of the valuation of the property, even the land and the property. When we're looking at the property just has to be in good and livable condition. It doesn't have to be amazing. This is obviously from an investment perspective. When it's your home, do what you want. But when it's an investment, it just has to be in good condition, has to be livable. Because everyone's got different standards of living, right? I have a different standard of living to Cyril and to Aba. Everyone's got different, I can live in a shed. Everyone else is different. Someone needs a nice toilet, a nice bathroom, a nice kitchen. But when it comes to your tenants, everyone is different. So you don't have to get the top end, you just have to be in the right location. Because people want to be in a location before anything else. They want to be in a location for schools, for parks, for childcare, for cafes, restaurants. They want the lifestyle of that particular location, and they will live in whatever for it, as long as it's livable. The land is relative. So is 500 square meters big? I don't know. It depends where you are, right? If you're in a location where the average land size is 500 square meters, we have average land size. But in that same location, if I bought 200 square meters, I have small land. If I bought 800 square meters, I have a lot of land. But if I bought 800 square meters in a location where the average size was 1,000, I have small land. So it's all relative to your location. So that's why land comes under location. So the key metrics to finding the perfect location, everything in economics and anything to do with money, anytime money is exchanging, comes down to supply and demand. Whether it's a health clinic, whether it's real estate, whatever it is, it all comes down to supply and demand. If I have the only cup of tea in the world, it's going to be worth a lot more than if everyone has a cup of tea in the world. If this is the last computer ever, it's going to be worth a lot more than what it is today, right? So there's no supply, lots of people want to buy it, goes up. So when we're looking at buying property or buying real estate and getting the perfect location, we look at about 150 data points, but they all kind of come under 9 key metrics. Or 8, I don't know how many there are there. We'll find out. So I'll go through them quickly. If there's any questions, by the way, please just shout at me. So stock on market is the first one. But through all of these, we're trying to measure supply and demand. So stock on market is how many properties are available for sale in a particular location at any one time. So if Liverpool has 100 properties and there are 10 for sale, the stock on market is 10%. That's a very high percentage. We would say that's too much supply. And if you have too much supply, not enough demand, prices go down. So we're looking for the opposite. So if there was 100 properties and there's only 1 property for sale, 1%, okay, that's very little supply. There's a decent demand, property prices are going to go up in that area. The next thing we look at is the days on market. This is just measuring how long it takes for a property to sell in a location. And we look at that, and we look at the last 10, 15 years and see how it's moving, right? So we say, okay, it's taking 30 days for a property to sell in Liverpool. On its own, that doesn't mean anything. What does that mean? We look last month. Last month it was 35 days. The month before it was 40, 45. We can see a trend that's going down. It's getting quicker and quicker to sell a property. So what we can see there is there's either a lot of demand or not enough supply, but what we know is that the demand is outweighing the supply because properties are selling quick. The flip side, if it only took 5 days to sell, you're like, oh, that's crazy. But the last 6 months was only 1 day. It's actually slower. It's still very short, but we've got to read into why is it taking an extra 4 days to sell a property where it usually only took 1 day. The yield is just a fancy term to measure rent against the purchase price. So if it's $500 a week is your rent and your purchase price is 500 grand, $500 times 52 weeks in the year divided by 500 grand is 5.2%. So the yield is just a measure of rent. Hey?
Quick math.
No, it's a common one we use a lot. Ask me anything else, I don't know. Vacancy rate is, this is with the tenants, with the rental, we're trying to understand, okay, it's all well and good to buy a great property and a good location or not, but if no one's going to rent it, that's a problem. So vacancy is checking, obviously, how many properties are vacant when it comes to renting. So same kind of measurement style. If there's 100 properties for rent in a location and one was vacant, you have a vacancy rate of 1%. So we typically don't want anything more than 1%, because you don't want to be at risk of buying a property and being vacant, right? Auction clearance rate is just measuring how many properties sell at auction. So if there was 100 properties went for auction and they all sold, that's a clearance rate of 100%. And the news loves the auction clearance rate. If you ever click on the news, they'll, oh, Saturday's auction clearance rate 88%. Oh, Sydney's crashing, whatever. So like, auction clearance rate though has to be taken with a pinch of salt, because Sydney and Melbourne, we love auctions. Everything goes to auction. Outside of Sydney and Melbourne, they don't really like auctions. Adelaide doesn't really go to auctions. Brisbane, we don't really go to auctions. Perth, not an auction city. So you might have really poor clearance rates in those cities. It's because people don't like auctions. People don't go there. So you have to really, everything has to be taken with its own kind of area. The vendor discount is something we measure, which is, I'm a vendor, so the vendor is the person selling a property, and I want to sell my house for 500. Cyril buys it for 490. I've given him a discount of $10,000, and we work that out as a percentage. On the flip side, I want to sell it for 5. He buys it for 505. There's a premium, and it becomes not a discount. It's a plus number. We work out the vendor discount for an area. If the vendor discount is very high, we know that either the demand is low, not enough people want to buy it, so I'm selling it at a big discount, or the supply is too high. Even though if the demand's high, but there's so much supply that the buyers can pick and choose what they want. So we want to find areas with very little vendor discount. Rent to income ratio is something we measure. Again, a lot of people don't look at this stuff, and it's what it is okay. I pay $500 a week in rent. I make $1,000 a week in income. So my rent to income is 500 to 1,000. 50% of my rent, 50% of my income is going to my rent. That's very high, and it's a very dangerous number for a location. If that entire area was similar to like those numbers, we would say, okay, there is a problem here, because if the tenants lost their jobs, if they had an accident, couldn't work, whatever the issue is, if they lose any income, they can't afford to live here, they're going to leave, right? And we don't want those vacancies. Building approvals. This is a measure of how many buildings that the council is approving to be built in a new area. We don't want this number to be high. We want this number to be low, because again, this comes down to a measure of supply. So with all of these things, we're looking for the toughest markets to buy in. We're looking for areas where there is nothing for sale and everyone wants to buy in it. And it makes our job, for example, extremely difficult, because like we're competing with another 100, 200 people, and there's only one house for sale. We don't want those areas where you can buy at a discount. We don't want to buy in areas where it's a buyer's market. You might get amazing, I bought it $50,000 less than what the guy bought it for. That's a problem, because the market's going the wrong way. We want to be buying in an area, unfortunately I paid $50,000 more than what that guy paid, but the whole area is moving at 10% a year. So we want to be buying in these areas. There's nothing for sale. When we get in, now we control the nothing for sale. We control that land and those properties. Just a little thing, we always say, when you're buying property, you should have like a plan, like a goal. And we always say start with the end in mind. And your goal is going to change, and your plans change, and your strategies change, and that's fine. You have to have some sort of idea why you're buying property and where you're trying to get to through investing. A very common goal people say is, I want $100,000 passive income by the time I retire. So passive income, obviously income that I'm not working like directly for, it just comes in the back end. And you say, okay, how do I get $100,000? And we start backwards. At 5% yield, which is a pretty decent yield, it's $2.5 million of property, and it's all paid off. 5% of $2.5 million is 125. You got some maintenance costs, toilets break and whatnot, and you left with 100,000. That's an example of starting with the end in mind. And then, you know, that changes. You get married, you have a child, you start a business, you know, you get a divorce, whatever it is. Things change in your life and your goals change. But once that changes, you can change your plans and how you're going to get there. But if you don't really know where you're going, it's very hard to start getting there. Right? So even if it's a very rough idea, it's good to have an end in mind. So the current market. We'll talk very quickly about what's happening at the moment, because there's a lot of media talk and a lot of crazy things going on in the media. There are two major things happening right now. Inflation is a key word in the current market, and interest rates. Anyone know what inflation is? Someone want to shout? Nope. Yeah?
No? What?
Oh, I just saw a hand. No, I was going to pounce on it. Alright, so inflation is when there is more money in the economy than there is stuff to spend it on. So the cost of goods and services increase. Alright, so we'll go through a little story. Let's call ourselves Flex Village. Right? We are a village, this is Flex Village. There are little images here, you might not see it, but I'll talk through.
So cute.
So this is Flex Village. We are all one village, and there is one supermarket where we buy everything. We buy groceries, we buy hats, we buy shoes, whatever you want to buy, tobacco, you buy it all from this one place, right? Interest rates are low, and the government's giving out money, cashbacks, rebates, whatever. We become this guy here, mad, we're rich, happy days. We go spending stuff. We go spend money on stuff. We start buying stuff. We start buying fancy stuff. And we're going to use an electric bike as an example. We all decided we're going to go buy electric bikes, and this is actually what happened during COVID, because you couldn't go out, and the only time you could go out was exercise. So everyone went and started buying bikes and stuff. Right? So we go to our supermarket, all of us Flex Village, we go to the supermarket and we start buying electric bikes. And they're $50 each. The bikes sell out. But there's still so many of us that want to buy bikes. So the store owner gets more, starts selling them for $100. Because he can. That's inflation. Right? So the village is everyone, and the supermarket is the entire economy. And people want to spend their money faster than businesses can create the product. So the business owner can't get more bikes in time, so he's got to increase the price. Inflation in small doses is a very good thing, because it means our economy is strong and our economy is growing. But inflation is also why movie tickets used to be $5 and now they're 20 or 25. I don't know how much they are, but they're a lot. We'll go back to Flex Village. So the price of the bikes have doubled. The business owner is like, I'm sick, I'm awesome, I'm going to get a loan, interest rates are low, I'm going to open a factory and make my own bikes. So yeah, the business owner hires staff, but creating bikes, business booming, happy days. But then the government money runs out. Right? The government stops giving out money, there's no more rebates, there's no more cashbacks, interest rates go up, people stop spending money, people start saving. Business owners like, I've got like 40,000 bikes, what do I do with this? Right? I can't sell these bikes, no one wants to buy it. Closes the factory, people lose their jobs, that's a recession. So this is kind of how the economy up and down. Recession is obviously an extreme term when like it goes really bad, when that's happening with everyone. But this is typically a cycle of like a business with interest and whatnot, and how inflation can affect people. So during COVID, the government was literally giving out money, it was free money, and the idea was to keep the economy going, because if they didn't give out money and people aren't working, what do? We're all going to go home, not spend anything, we're not going to do anything, businesses are going to lose money, and so there's a problem. So they gave out money so we can spend it, so the economy can stay stimulated. Problem was, because of COVID, people couldn't get to work. You know, they were ill, they were sick, they just had restrictions, so we have supply chain issues. So I don't know if anyone's trying to buy a car at the moment, very difficult to buy a car. You know, if you buy a brand new car, it's a 1 year waiting list. Timber construction through the roof right now is very expensive to build, because we actually cannot get timber into this country. We have no timber. It's crazy. So we have supply chain issues. We can't get the products in quick enough with the demand, and everyone's super rich now because the government's giving out money. So everyone increases prices at the same time, and that's mass inflation, and that's what's happening currently. But what happens when that happens at an extreme level? So right now the inflation level is 5%. So what that means is essentially whatever something costs today, next year, or last year, it was 5% less, and it costs 5% more today. When it happens at extreme levels like 50%, 60%, 70%, you get mass panic, you get Great Depressions, you get anarchy, you go to Zimbabwe, for example, you have mass inflation, and if you want to buy an apple or a banana, you have to take a basket of cash, right? It's impossible. Like, cash is worthless. Like Zimbabwe, for example, they have gone back to bartering, where I want to buy Cyril's phone, I'm going to trade my cup of tea for it. Money means nothing. It's worthless. It has no value. That's an extreme level. What do interest rates have to do with it? So the RBA, which is the Reserve Bank of Australia, is the puppet master of Australia, right? They decide how things are going to happen, and we listen like idiots, right? Like, yeah, interest rates are up. Interest rates are down, yeah. So the RBA sets rules and policies on how banks should operate, and the RBA is not about profit. The RBA is about trying to keep our economy growing and growing slowly at a sustainable pace. The RBA's job is to prevent depressions and widespread panics and what's happening in Zimbabwe, Africa, and whatnot. But they are the puppet master, and they've got some strings that they pull on to try and affect how the market moves. And they dictate the price of goods and services. So they've got interest rates, open market operations, printing money. We'll talk about interest rates. So the interest rate string is, we decrease the interest rates, like we spoke about before. The business owner is more likely to pull out a loan to start a business, or you're more likely to buy a car or a house because money is cheap. It's cheaper for me to borrow money, so I'm going to go do stuff. So if money is cheap and we're spending, inflation goes up because we're starting to spend. On the flip side, when interest rates go up, we start saving money, we stop spending, inflation goes down. So currently, the RBA is trying to find a balance, and balance is key. And sometimes it's not just about the number, what the interest rate is, it's about how they get there. So the last decision went up by 50 basis points, so 0.5%, which is a big jump, right? For especially like we were on 0.1% for like 2 years or a year and a half, and then all of a sudden 0.5 up. And we're suspecting it's scaring people as well. So balance is key, and they play with these strings and they change the interest rate, trying to get Australia to move in a certain way so that we're not in super inflation, but we're also not in a decline, in a recession. That's the current market and interest rates and whatnot. I'll speak very quickly about what I do, like super quick, and then I'll let you guys ask questions. So as mentioned at the start, we help people buy property. At the start, we do goal setting and strategy. So start with the end in mind. We understand where you want to go, and then we work out how we're going to get there. Once we know that, we do a data analysis across all of Australia. So those key metrics that we're looking at, those are 9 of them. We're looking at about 150 per suburb. And we look at every single suburb in this country to work out the best location for your budget, for your strategy, for your finances. We literally find the top 10 suburbs in this country for you. And it's very personalized to your strategy and everything. Once we've done that, we know our locations, we start sourcing properties. So we speak to all the agents, we look at all the properties on the market. And I don't know if you've heard of off-market, the term off-market or not. So properties that are not for sale or not on realestate.com or domain. We have access to that stuff. So we go through all these properties. So we have 10 target suburbs, 10 properties per suburb, that's 100 properties. We analyze every single property from 2 perspectives. The valuation, which is, okay, this property is worth $500,000. The vendor wants $550, scrap it, we're not going to talk to them. Or the other side is it's worth 500, they want 450 to 500, excellent. We've got 50 grand wiggle room where we can buy this property undervalued. So that's the most important aspect. The other aspect is making sure the property is in good and livable condition, the floor plan makes sense, it's in the right aspect, the sun is hitting the right spots of their house. That's not less important, but we have to check it. Once we've done that, we find the perfect property, we start negotiating on your behalf, we speak to the agents. If it goes to auction, we get an auction for you. A lot of times we have connections with the agents, we get quick deals. Then we sort out your building and pest, the conveyancing, all the due diligence, and then sort out a property manager. Happy days. That's what we do. This is just an example of a property we bought actually not too long ago in Sydney. We bought it for $720,000. The valuation from the bank came back at $770,000, so the property was $50,000 undervalued. Another one in Brisbane. This was more about the cash flow. This one was purchased at $410,000. It was valued at $445,000. The rental yield is 5%, so you're getting $420 a week, and your mortgage is $400 grand. right? So you're making more money than your loan is costing you. So the property is paying itself off, and it's going up in value. Those are the properties we love. We love these high yield, high growth properties. And we like it because when we go back to that at the start serviceability, when I go to the bank and say, hey, I want more money, what's your current debt situation? The rent pays for it. Nothing from my salary is being touched. So the bank says, oh, okay, here's more money. And we continue to do that. And that's how the big guys scale their properties. You know, those people, those stories, 10 properties, 20 properties. It's impossible without cash flow. I think this is my last one. We bought in Adelaide. This was not on any market. It was not on any real estate domain. Was not on any source. It was off market. We bought it for $330, and it was getting $370 a week rent, which is 5.8% yield, which is outstanding yield. So those are some examples of properties you can buy across different price points: 300, 500, 700, obviously millions and whatnot as well. But people often think you can't buy properties for 300, 400. We do it every day. If anyone actually wants to read about those key metrics that we're discussing, those 9 points, I did write an ebook, actually 1 year to the day. And there's a QR code there that you can.
I knew that. That's why I got you in today.
Yeah, did you? Thank you. You can get that book. It's for free, completely free. And we are on every single social media. We're on TikTok. I don't know what to do with it, but we're there. I'm not sure how to use it, but we're there.
We'll shoot one together later.
Yeah. So if you search First Brick Property, we're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We also have a podcast, which is on YouTube and podcast players, which is called the First Brick Property Podcast, every week. And it's just a bit of free education, trying to help people get where they want to get to. I don't think I have anything else. Yeah, just anyway, I don't know what the time is. I've been talking for
No, that's awesome. Thanks so much. My phone's recording.
Thank you guys for pretending to listen. It's nicer than the kids at school. They just throw stuff at you. Any questions?
I have a question about inflation, right? You know how they put the interest rates up so that inflation doesn't go up?
Yeah.
Doesn't that create the opposite effect sometimes? Because if the interest rate is up, of course I'm not going to borrow money, or I'm not going to want to borrow money, but because the interest rates have gone up, my prices have to go up. Like, do you know
your
what I mean?
Spending goes, your costs go
Exactly.
up as well. Yeah, your loan goes up,
Yeah.
so you've got to charge more for
Exactly. So
Correct.
doesn't it have the opposite effect sometimes?
So in a very small capacity, you are correct, but the interest rate is affecting the entire country. So there's 25, 26, 27 million, however million our population is at the moment. And so on a wide scale, it does what they want it to do.
Okay.
And on a wide scale, people spend less because their costs have gone up. So I know you're looking from a business perspective. I'm a business owner, and my loan has gone up, so I've got to charge my clients more. But also your clients don't come in. The clients stop coming because it costs them more. So it slows down everything. And so when this is happening across the entire country, all at the same time, inflation does start to come down. But just on a note on inflation, I could getting a bit technical. Everything happens very laggy. So the interest rates go up, and they're going to go up again, and they're going to go up every single month till the end of the year, guaranteed, right? But you won't see these effects on inflation for maybe another year. So we might see inflation hit 7-8% next year before it starts coming down. So everything happens laggy because people have fixed interest rates. People have, small loans. People, when the interest rates go up, they refinance and stuff, and the banks give a lot of discounts at the start. So your fixed interest rate might be fixed for 2 years or something, and it might not come down for a while. And that's why everything happens kind of in reverse, a little bit laggy.
Awesome. No,
Yeah.
thank you for that. That was a great
Good.
answer.
Anyone else?
Yeah, question. Can you explain the rent to income metric? I don't really understand.
So if my rent is $500 a week and my income as an employee is $1,000 a week, rent 500 to 1,000, so 1 to 2, 50%. So 50% of my income is being paid to rent.
Are you talking about if I'm purchasing?
As in
are you looking
you're
for
the
people
tenant.
in the area?
Sorry. So if I'm a tenant.
Okay,
Yeah. Sorry,
okay.
my bad.
Yeah.
So if I'm the tenant,
Yeah.
and my rent is $500 a week, and my income is 1,000,
Okay.
then it's costing me half my income every week just to live
Yeah.
in my home. where that's not taking into account groceries and shopping and kids and schools and whatever. So that's a very high number.
Yeah.
And we're saying if an entire location, all of the tenants are in that same boat, and that's the average rent to income ratio,
Yeah.
we're saying, okay, any loss of job or any problem or school excursion that's going to cost an extra $20 is going to put an actual strain on that family's household income. They're most likely going to leave, and I'm more likely going to have more vacancies and higher turnover in my property. So we're looking for areas that have like a 30% and less number. And lower means there's probably, the rent's probably too low, which means you can increase your rent. And then too high, obviously, we're worried that anything like that, you lose your tenants.
Yeah.
They can't afford to live there, essentially. Does that answer it?
Yeah.
Sorry, probably didn't mention it before.
So like 30% is like a
30% is the perfect number. 30% is the perfect number with like a lot of things. There's one, I think I didn't put in the percentage of renters in a market. Maybe I did, I can't remember if I spoke about it. But we're measuring how many renters live in a market, so in a location, say in Liverpool, the perfect number is 30%. And the reason 30% is the perfect number is in Australia, out of all the people that have purchased properties, 70% of people that purchase properties are owner-occupiers. 70% of people that buy property in Australia are buying to live in it, right? 30% are investors. So if that's the number across Australia, we kind of want that in sub-markets as well. And what we know is so the real estate market works on emotion. The real estate market is very different to shares, it's very different to business, and Australia's real estate market is very different to international real estate markets. And this is why our market doesn't crash 30% and 20%, because Australians love property. We love property. We'll do whatever we can to hold our properties. And during COVID, people got second and third jobs, and if it means I have to eat noodles for 2 weeks instead of selling my house, that's what I'm going to do. So that comes back to the location. We're finding the perfect location where people want to live, right? And so one of those metrics is the renters in market. If I have too many renters in a market, that means I don't have enough owner-occupiers. That means there's not enough emotional money coming into this location. But if it's around that 30% or under, it's like, okay, 70% of people in Liverpool buying a house here to live in it, that means they want to be here. If I'm trying to buy a house, or if I buy a house, and then next door is selling, I know that 7 out of 10 people trying to buy this property are going to be trying to buy it to live in. What happens when you want to buy something to live in or to use it yourself? We start making silly decisions. We pay emotionally. I want to live here no matter what because my mum lives there, my granny lives there, and my kids are going to go to that school, and there's a Westfield here. I don't care what you say the property is worth, I'm buying it. It's happening right now. It happens every day. My sister yesterday showed me a property. I want this house. It's worth this. I've already offered more than that. What are you doing? But I want to live here. Like, I don't care what I pay. I want this property because of the location. It's close to school. It's close. It's the perfect house for her. So she doesn't care what she pays. So when you have an entire market that doesn't care what they pay, you have too much demand, not enough supply, and people are paying emotional prices go up. So you've got too many renters in a market, you have too many investors. And what are investors doing? They're paying with their calculator. They're not paying with their heart, they're paying with their mind. So they pay investor prices. We don't want those people. We don't want those people in my area. I want to be in an area where everyone's buying because they love the area and they'll pay whatever. So that's a, I don't know if I was in the slides, but that's a very important metric actually.
Yeah.
And if you go too low, you don't have enough renters, you might, perfect location, price go up, but you might never have a tenant. Because you don't have enough people actually, renting.
Wanting to live there. Amazing.
Anything else?
Please come back next week.
It's hot in here.
Any other questions, guys?
No, pretty simple, huh? Cool.
Just very quickly, what do you think is like the best way to get started with this? Is it to do your own research, or is it to like book in a consultation?
Do you want to plug? Or?
yeah, please.
No, look, I think the first thing you should do is speak to your broker.
We might get Fatty in next week.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you wanted
Yeah.
me to bring him in with me, but I guess we don't have time for that.
Yeah.
He likes to talk as much as me.
Yeah.
First thing that you do is speak to your broker.
I'll organise time for a broker to come in.
He's not as fun as me, but I don't like him more than me.
Yeah.
But look, because without knowing what you can spend, it is impossible for me or you to know what to do.
Damn, I should have done that one first.
No, well, this is a very common actually mistake. We get a lot of people calling, hey, what do you think of this property? What's your budget? I don't know. The property's nice. It's a very nice staircase. So what is that? Who cares? Very renovated bathroom. Like, without knowing a budget, it's very hard to know what we're looking for. Because if you have 400,000, if you have $1 million, if you have 5 million, we're looking in very different locations. We've got different strategies. You know, are we splitting the properties up, the budget up into different properties? Are we not? Like, so first step is speak to your broker, and then definitely do your own research. Like we can help as well. Like with our service, like we're always happy to help people. We get called every single day, and people just have questions, and we're happy to help. And that's why we have the ebook and the podcast. Like we are very much about free education, and we know what we do is not for everyone, our service, but doesn't mean we just leave you stranded. So we're happy to help people. So if you do have questions, yeah, happy to chat. Cool. Better than health, yeah. Better than health topics. Oh yeah, this is a bone. That's a
Awesome.
No one else?
Thank you so much, Cam.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go for it. Laura.
How long does the whole process take?
The buying process, like buying
from
one property.
going to the broker to
Yeah. So the banks are a little bit slow at the moment. So the broker portion of it can take a week. It can take 3 months. 3 months is a bit extreme. My last loan took me 6 months to come through, just because the banks were slow. It was during COVID. I'm a bit funky. I like to fight people in the banks, try and get more money. But if you speak with a broker, the broker part comes down to how quickly you get information to them. So they're going to ask you for pay slips, all that stuff. If you get stuff to them out quick, they will get it done quick, and then it could be 2 week, 3 week turnaround till you get a pre-approval. From our end, the data analysis, that first portion takes us 1 week, because we're looking at every property, every suburb in the country, and we do that with every client. So that takes a bit of time. Once that week is done, it's just about what's available at what time. So it could take 1 day. Literally the next day, like, is a property and it works, perfect, tick, we buy it. Or it could take 6-8 weeks. Our average kind of turnaround time is about 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. So not long. Yeah. Most people that do it themselves, the average turnaround time I think is 90 days, 3 months. Yeah, and they do it wrong. Sorry.
No, definitely. So you're the guy on Selling Sunset that goes to people's houses.
Yeah, luxury listings. Have you watched it?
Yeah.
You know the guy, the big nose?
Yeah, the
Simon?
Jewish guy.
That's the
We
guy.
watched a couple of
He does the same thing I do, but he is upper echelon of the world, and I like to work with the $300,000 properties. But he mainly works with owner occupiers, so people buying a house to live in.
Yeah.
I like the investors because it's more numbers, data. I like to make people money. He's kind of like, oh, look at this castle.
Yeah.
80 million. Yeah, but
Oh,
same
awesome.
job. Same job, different job.
Nice. Thanks heaps.
Anyone else? Nothing? Cool. Sorry to bore you guys.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, bro.
All right.